Thank you very much, Acting Speaker, and I rise to make a contribution on the Agriculture and Food Safety Legislation Amendment Bill 2024. Acting Speaker, as we have heard from previous speakers, this bill amends the Dairy Act 2000, the Food Act 1984, the Meat Industry Act 1993 and the Seafood Safety Act 2003, and it's intended to address certain regulatory risks, streamline the functions of regulators, improve consistency between the acts and provide increased clarity to Victorian primary production businesses. But, Acting Speaker, there's one particular element of the bill that I wish to mainly focus on. I want to go into a bit more detail on that than maybe some of the other previous speakers have, and that is the element that expands the fit and proper person test for the seafood industry. And I acknowledge the member for Greenvale just gave some additional detail on that, which was good. But between houses, Acting Speaker, I would like to see quite a bit more detail provided on that particular issue, and I'd like to explain why. So this bill expands consideration of a fit and proper person to include whether the applicant or licensee is of good repute, having respect to character, honesty and integrity. Don't have to, that's fine. But there are so many, I guess, unanswered questions in relation to the other elements of this, including, obviously what is the definition of good repute. But where it gets more complicated is that this bill intends to further extend it to an associate. It extends it to business associations and business associations of associates. Now, good luck policing that, Acting Speaker. Does that mean you need to do a background check on every person that you are developing some sort of a friendship with, or you might be caught out by this? It also says it relates to a person who holds a relevant position in the seafood business must also be of good repute, having respect to character, honesty and integrity. Now, when it talks about a position within the seafood business, this is in reference to staff. It's talking about staff. So let me paint a bit of a picture for you here. That then applies to the deckies on the fishing boats. It applies to the filleters of fish. And we have very significant fishing fleets operating at a number of our coastal communities. I think of Lakes Entrance in my electorate, but also San Remo, down at Port Arlington on the Bellarine. You've got Port Phillip, you've got Warrnambool, you've got Port Welshpool. There's a fishing presence in Port Fairy, in Portland, and no doubt there's many other locations as well. And these are fishing sector businesses that, like many other businesses in this state at the moment, are finding it very difficult to access staff. It is not easy for them to source appropriate staff. And a job at sea, with its very, very long hours and hard manual labour, is certainly not for everyone. Now, among these crew members, these deckies, are people who are getting their life together. They're on the road back from, they might have made a poor decision or two in the past, but they're getting their lives together and trying to make the most of their second chance. Now, this fit and proper person test proposed by the government relates to a person who holds a relevant position in the seafood business. We want to know what that relevant position is. Does that apply to all staff or not? And that's the level of detail we haven't got, and I'm hoping speakers on the other side or between houses can give us a bit more detail on that. Will the business owner who's given this person a helping hand, and maybe even they've advanced to a management position within the business, are they going to be punished for giving these people, I guess, a second go if they fail this fit and proper person test? As other speakers have said, why is this being applied to the fishing sector? I'm reliably told there are 42 acts in the Victorian legislation that have passed through Parliament, which include clauses relating to a fit and proper person. But of these, only 3 or 4 contain a reference or similar references to be associated with a person. And that's another grey area. Now, I'm sure the commercial fishing sector in the Labor electorates of Bass and around the Bellarine Peninsula, I'm sure they've got some question marks over this, because the fishing sector more generally, including some of their representative groups and agencies that we've spoken to in the last few days, need clarity on these issues. If there's nothing to worry about, tell us about the detail. But it should not be applying to a sector that's going to knock people out who are having a go trying to get their lives together in an area where employees are hard to find. Now, I'm also aware through this chamber that SARC has written to the Minister expressing concern that this section of the bill has impacts on freedom of association. It's simply unreasonable that we're applying a test that all associates of seafood licensees must be of good repute. It is just unreasonable. It's not consistent with food safety regulation in other jurisdictions around Australia. And as yet, and I've been listening in my office down there, I haven't had a good explanation of the detail that we would need and the seafood industry would be comfortable with to support this bill. I'll also add that these extra layers are an administrative burden to these fishing operations. It'll add more cost to ensure these processes are undertaken. It disadvantages with other states, and therefore it disadvantages us with seafood imports. The cost of local seafood rises when we put additional administrative burdens on the seafood sector. Now, I said in this chamber just last week when I was talking about the commercial fishing sector in Lakes Entrance, we're already a net importer of seafood. You know, we're an island nation and a coastal state, and we import 70% of our seafood. Now, it appears to me the government has either not fully considered the impact of this on the seafood industry and those staff members working in it, or does not know the detail as yet that we need to know to be able to support this bill. So apart from the financial disadvantage and the impact it'll have on some employees, or the potential impact, because we don't know the detail, there are two major questions in addition to those that need to be asked. The first is, why is this being applied to the seafood industry and covering off on associates of those in the sector? And what are the details of this test? Is it going to impact our deckies? Is it going to impact our fish filleters? Does it prevent a decky getting promoted to a management position? Because they would then be implicated in this issue. Now, so Speaker, they're the issues I've got around the seafood industry. Just briefly before I finish, as our lead speaker stated, the member for Lowen, there's some simmering concerns in the meat sector that broadening information sharing will allow for private information to be shared and potentially published without the knowledge of the business. We need some clarity on that between houses, and with no right to a fair process or natural justice being outlined if that occurs. Further, the type of information that will be mandated to be gathered or reported, I believe there'll be an overarching framework in future legislation, but that's likely to be covered off in not through the legislation, but it's likely to be covered off when we go through the process of the minister going through the non-legislative process to put those details in place, and that is of particular concern as well. Now, this means that changes to information gathering or reporting won't be known until the regulations, which was the word I was looking for, Acting Speaker, that the regulations are determined by the minister. So again, we have a bill with overarching framework, and it will be the detail in the regulation that will determine whether it's appropriate or not. So we don't really know what we're signing on for here. We've got some of this stuff that will be determined in regulation later. We're being asked to pass a fit and proper person test for the seafood industry with no detail whatsoever. And at the very least, we shouldn't be disadvantaging the fishing sector, the commercial fishing sector, by burdening this on them. There'll be a lot of people very uneasy at the moment. I know of a number of people in the Lakes Entrance fishing sector that, yeah, they've made some poor decisions, but they're on the way back. They want to know that this isn't going to rule them out of having a job or getting a job promotion. It's another case of legislation coming in here lacking the details that we need and hence, Acting Speaker, we will not be supporting this bill, and I certainly support the reasoned amendment of the Shadow Minister.